What's going on, everyone? Happy weekend to you all. Today, we are going to look into and take a deep dive into the NFC East. All right, it is time to break down this division and see what moves were made this offseason, and then what we can expect from these four teams and what kind of year we think that they are going to have. So, first and foremost, we got to look back at last year before we can look ahead. So, if we're looking back to last year, starts at the top. The Philadelphia Eagles, who are your Super Bowl champions, finished last year first in this division at 14-3. The number 2 team in this division surprised a lot of people, and it was the Washington Commanders. They finished 12-5. Of course, Jaden Daniels led the way, and they had a great playoff run, which I think also boosted a lot of expectations for this team going into this season. I think if they had a great regular season at 12-5, but had they just been a one and done and lost to that Detroit Lions team, which many thought was going to win anyway, I think this year the expectations would have been like, all right, nice team last year. Can they take another step and, maybe become contenders this year? But I think because they had such a good playoff run, I think suddenly people are looking at them as Super Bowl contenders. But do I look at them like that? We'll find out. But number 3 last year was the Dallas Cowboys, 7-10 record. What happened, Dallas? But really, did we expect any better? And then the 4th and last place in the division last year was the New York Giants. The G-Men went 3-14 last year, so not a good year for them. And quite frankly, I don't know that it's going to be another good year for them again, but we'll see. All right, let's start with the Eagles. Let's look there. The biggest thing that I think about when I think about the Philadelphia Eagles is that they lost some guys on the secondary. So taking a look at my notes here, they lost James Bradbury, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, and Isaiah Rodgers. Those are 4 cornerbacks that they lost last year. Now, obviously, they had their rookie from last year, Quinyon Mitchell, who's a stud. But really, he had one good year so far. Let's see if he can keep it up. I do think that he will. But that secondary, losing 4 guys is kind of a big deal. And then they just made a trade this last week with the Vegas Raiders. They got Ja'Karian Bennett. So I will say this. Everyone thinks this is a great trade for them because they think Bennett played some great ball last year for the Raiders, which, don't get me wrong, maybe it was a great deal for them. I didn't really watch this kid play. Apparently, he's young. He's 24 years old, and when he played last year, he played really well. But it tells me something else. The fact that Howie Roseman and the Eagles are doing a trade like this during training camp tells me, hey, maybe we are not so good at cornerback. So let's bring in someone. So that makes total sense considering they lost 4 corners. And I'd say some of them were pretty good. Like Darius Slay is legit. So, I mean, we'll see how they do and how that secondary does. But I do feel like that might be their weakness. They brought in Adoree Jackson, who's a vet at corner to help out. So, maybe that helps, ease the pain. But losing 4 guys like that and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, those guys played pretty good ball last year. So we'll see how that they do. But I expect that secondary to be worse. They re-signed Saquon Barkley. They re-signed Lane Johnson. So that's really good for them. Brandon Graham retired, so he went out on top. Good for you, bud. That's awesome. And other than that, they added A.J. Dillon to pair up with Saquon. They extended Saquon Barkley, well-deserved. And, in the draft, they always seem to draft well. They got Jihad Campbell, linebacker from Alabama, who everyone was surprised was still there at the end of the first round. And the Eagles do what the Eagles do. They usually pick well, unless it's, a wide receiver before the Vikings, which obviously that's a moment that will always be remembered when they passed up on Justin Jefferson. But let's be real, the draft, there's obviously a lot of times that you kind of know that you'll get a blue chip or a pretty solid player, but a lot of these later picks turned out being just kind of, really random. That's why there's a Tom Brady that gets picked in the 6th round. That's what happens. So again, I'm not going to, knock them for that like a lot of people do. The Eagles tend to draft really well. Jihad Campbell, I think, will be pretty awesome. There are 2 rookies last year, which played Quinyon Mitchell, as we mentioned, and Cooper DeJean played great last year. So I expect Jihad Campbell to be a stud for them. But that secondary is my concern. All right, moving on. Washington, what did they do? All right, the big question with them right now is Terry McLaurin. He wants over $30 million. I think they're probably offering $30 million. He's turning 30 this week. So something's going to give. they'll find an agreement. I doubt he sits out games, if they don't reach an agreement. But I think ultimately, if I'm Washington, I'll stick strong and offer him what I'm already offering him and assume that he's going to sign. He's never really had that big contract, so I dare him to see if he sits out any regular season games. I think ultimately he signs whatever offers on the table, and they're happy and they move forward, because that is probably the best deal he's going to get anyway. But aside from that, what did they do? They shore up their offensive line by trading with the Texans for left tackle Laramie Tunsil. Now, they gave up quite a bit, a third-round pick, I believe it was, and some other filler stuff. He is older. So that's the one thing that I didn't like that Washington did this offseason. It felt like they thought that their window is right now. And so they got all these veteran guys. I mean, they re-signed Bobby Wagner, which is a good move. Marcus Mariota, Noah Brown. They brought in Will Harris and Jonathan Jones at cornerback. They added Von Miller, who's up there in age as well. Javon Kinlaw, who's also not that young anymore. And, he kind of had some weird stuff going on with the San Francisco media. He was going back and forth with some guy there. They lost Dante Fowler, and they lost Jeremy Chin, their safety, and Benjamin St. Justy, who is their cornerback. They also lost Jonathan Allen, defensive lineman. He went to the Vikings, and De'Ami Brown, which we just mentioned the last podcast where we broke down the AFC West. So he's gone. So now, I think they're kind of going to be about the same as last year, but older. And when you're older, now you're more at risk for injuries. And, obviously Jaden Daniels not going to catch anyone off guard, but I will say Jaden Daniels last year didn't start off as good as he finished the season. So that progression that he had is great. And maybe if he continues this season and starts off how he ended last year, I think they're going to be a great football team. Don't get me wrong, but I don't really understand them kind of going all in for right now. I would have had a little bit more patience. I can't knock them for that, though, because in the NFL, obviously, it's what can you do for me now? And Jaden Daniels is on a second year of a rookie deal, so take advantage for sure of that rookie scale deal. But, some of these vets that they brought in, Von Miller has been injured before. Bobby Wagner is another year older. He's an old vet. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And I think that's kind of the hesitation with paying Terry McLaurin. He's also older. So we'll see how it works for them. I expect them to be around the same kind of football team, and we'll see how that plays out. We'll move on to Dallas. All right, the Cowboys. What is up with the Cowboys? All right, the big news, which probably the biggest news of the league right now that's still going on, is Micah Parsons. What's going on there? Is he going to get traded? What's going to happen? No, he's not going to get traded. He's going to stay with the Cowboys. Jerry Jones is going to pay him once the time is up, and if Micah doesn't blink and take whatever's there, if they even offered him something yet, that'll get resolved. Jerry Jones does this. He understands very well that it's business. He had a commentary earlier this week where he said to the fans to don't lose sleep over it. I agree with him. This is business. This is how it goes. I remember a time where Myles Garrett from the Browns requested to be traded a few months ago, just to 1 week later sign the biggest deal for a defensive end. And that team never wins. So, again, and there is a draw with Dallas. People are saying, well, what's the draw with Dallas? They're not winning. Yeah, they're not winning, and you're still so famous. They're not winning, and you're still able to capitalize on being a Dallas Cowboy. So, imagine if you are winning. So, again, I mean, Micah Parsons, we're not going to talk about this much more. He'll end up being on the Cowboys. That's not the question. The question for me is the Cowboys, to me, are like the buddy who's always falling for the super hot girl that is just not wifey material and then constantly gets upset when something goes wrong in the relationship. But that's his type of girl. That's like a toxic girl. And this is the Cowboys. That's why when they didn't need a wide receiver, they drafted, and good for them. I can't knock this pick, but they drafted CeeDee Lamb. At that point in time, their defense stunk. Okay. And they needed offensive line help. And have they won anything since then? No. But have they been sexy and splashy? Sure, because CeeDee Lamb is a top 5 receiver in the NFL. He's awesome. But again, sometimes you need boring. And the Cowboys Jerry Jones, that is his flaw, in my opinion. That's why, I mean, he's so damn entertaining. But sometimes you need boring. So, again, I think with a lot of these additions, they haven't really done that. But trading for George Pickens, I think is going to end up being a mistake because you do have CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb is clearly wide receiver 1. And if George Pickens doesn't get the ball for 2 straight games, good luck. The drama will continue. The entertainment will be A+, but the winning might not be. We will see. And now they got a new head coach, Brian Schottenheimer. Matt Eberflus, who was the head coach of the Bears, was terrible as a head coach, but as a defensive coordinator, I mean, and honestly, the Bears defense has been pretty good when he was head coach. So, yeah, I don't think he was a great leader of men per se for a whole locker room, but I also don't think he's a bad just football coach. So I think as a defensive coordinator, I don't think that's going to be bad. I think he'll be great. Mike Zimmer was there, and now it's Matt Eberflus. I think that's fine. Running back-wise, they're doing the whole running back by committee thing. They added Miles Sanders. It's not going to move the needle. They don't really have a great running back. They added Dante Fowler, who was lost from Washington. So he comes over to a division rival. They lost Cooper Rush. They lost Trey Lance. But, as I mentioned on the last pod, one of the 5 players I'm trying to watch this weekend is Joe Milton, the quarterback. So we'll see how Joe Milton plays so far. It's been pretty good stuff from camp from him. And they lost Brandon Cooks, wide receiver, and DeMarcus Lawrence. So we'll see. I don't think they're going to be much better. People are high on the offense because George Pickens. Again, that's like being super excited because your girl is hot. That's wonderful. But will she be your wife in 10 or 20 years? And those are qualities that you look for. George Pickens, I'm not sure is going to be married to the Cowboys next year because that's how toxic he is. That's why Pittsburgh constantly had issues with him. That's why he was over there in the end zone getting in a fight with a cornerback mid-play. Bro, not smart. The one thing that I like that the Cowboys did this offseason, I will give them credit. They did do a little bit of boring. They had the 12th pick in the draft, and people were like, who are they going to draft? Which exciting guy they're going to draft? And they did go boring. They drafted a guard out of Alabama, Tyler Booker. And that's the type of move that you need to do if you want to win. So, but you know what? If it wasn't for the Micah Parsons thing, people would be talking about Ashton Genty. People would be talking about, Travis Hunter, and they wouldn't be talking about Tyler Booker. And I think the Cowboys don't like that. I think they want to be talked about. So hopefully, at least this pick does pan out for them because they actually went boring. And I think those are the positions that are crucial and very important. And it's good that they did something like that this offseason. All right, last but not least, or maybe least, the Giants, who drafted Jackson Dart and drafted Cam Skattebo, or what's his name? Yes, Cam Skattebo out of Arizona State. And did you know that they drafted Abdul Carter, number 3? This guy is supposed to be the best defensive player, and I haven't heard a peep from camp about him. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if he's been hurt or if he's just not flashed. But that's kind of maybe a concern because everyone thought he was going to be like a stud. And usually you start hearing things out of camp like this guy's a beast. He's a monster. And we haven't heard much from him. They did shore up their secondary. The Giants this offseason, I feel like, did a lot of free agent signings that, again, kind of boring, but kind of what helps build a foundation for a football team. I kind of do like the direction that the Giants are going. They signed Javon Holland, a safety, Paulson Adebo, cornerback. So the secondary's better. They re-signed Darius Slayton. And then the quarterback thing, I mean, they drafted Jackson Dart, but he's not going to see the field this year because they also signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. So Jackson Dart's going to be QB3, which is fine. Let him develop and see if there's something there later into the future. I think he was like a 3rd-round pick anyway, so it's fine. You didn't invest everything on that. Chauncey Golston, they brought in from Dallas, and Ray Robertson Horn, he's a defensive tackle that they brought in from Jacksonville, who these guys are supposed to be solid players. So I looked them up a little bit. They're not splash names, to be honest. I hadn't heard of them before, but they're pretty solid pickups for a team that just needs good football players. They were terrible last year. And the one thing they have going for them, what I will say, is they have Malik Neighbors. And Neighbors, I'm going to say it right now, I think by the end of this season, he will be looked at as the best wide receiver in all of football, better than Jamar Chase, better than Justin Jefferson, better than CeeDee Lamb. I think this guy is crazy good. Some of his routes and the route running and the way he balances his body on tape that I've seen is crazy. So, again, no disrespect to the other guys, but I think Malik Nabers is going to be an incredible wide receiver for them. So now the only question is, can they get a quarterback to get him the ball? And whether it's Russell Wilson or whether it's Jameis Winston, I think that's already going to be better than whatever they had going on last year with Daniel Jones and all that. So I think the Giants will actually be a little bit more improved. Again, I think having just better all-around football players lifts your team by a little bit. So, all right, what do we expect out of this division? I'm going easy pick here at the top. I think the Eagles are winning this division again, for sure. I don't think they're going to be as good. I don't think they're going to go 14-3, but I'll give them a 12-5. I think they could go 12-5 this year or a 13-4, something like that. I think they'll be at the top, number one again. I think Washington might move back a little bit. I know that, it seems like they're going to be great and people have these high expectations, but I just don't think that they really moved the needle much in the offseason. And I think now people have the guard up with them. So Washington from 12-5, I'm going to give them a 10-7. I think they're going to drop a couple games just based on being a little bit older, injuries, the length of the season, and just people kind of being more on guard now for them. So we got the Eagles. I'll go 13-4 for the Eagles. I'll think Washington goes 10-7 this year. I think they still make the playoffs for sure. And then I'm going to go out on the limb here. I think the Giants are going to be a lot better. I know that they're supposed to be one of the worst teams in the league, but I actually don't mind what they've done. They still have some studs and some good players on defense. And I also think that they got to start winning soon. That's why I think they brought that. Don't get me wrong. As an organization, I don't think their drafting and all that has been particularly in tune with their free agency. Like you drafted a quarterback, but then signed 2 veteran quarterbacks to not give him a chance whatsoever. But I do think that they'll be a little bit better. I think they're actually going to be 7-10. I think they'll be a little bit better. And I think the Cowboys are not going to be good. I don't see it with them. I know that people have high praise because of the splash players, but again, I don't think that's sustainable. And I think there's going to be major change, and I just don't like it for them. So I actually have them in 4th place. Call me crazy, but I think they're going to go 6-11 this year. That's what I predict. I just think they're all over the place. The Micah Parsons thing's already starting off with a lot of drama. Again, I think Dak, if he struggles a couple games and Joe Milton plays well in the preseason, there's going to be stuff going on there. George Pickens, again, call me crazy. We'll talk at the end of the season. I will eat my words if they win this division. But I think they're going to be right around. I think that the Cowboys and Giants are going to be a lot closer than people think. And, yeah, we'll see. So it feels wrong for me to pick that and for me to think that they're going to be 6-11. But I think it's because it could fall apart, I guess, is my thought with that. Not necessarily I think that they're a 6-11 football team, but I think if they start 2-4, the drama starts, the chatter starts, the complaining starts. George Pickens is going to start complaining, pointing fingers, and I think it could fall apart. On the surface, talent-wise and even coaching-wise, with Eberflus as defensive coordinator, I don't think they're 6-11. I think they're closer to 9-8. But I think it will fall apart, and down the stretch, they'll just be losing games because it's going to be a broken locker room. We'll see. I could be wrong. That's my expectation. Philly, number 1, 12-5 or 11-6. Let's give them 12-5. 12-5. Philly, 12-5. Washington, 10-7. Giants, 7-10. Cowboys, 6-11.